Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Venture Fuel Visionaries podcast. I'm your host, Fred Schonenberg, and on today's show, we have Ken Evans. Ken is the managing director of the Accelerator Program for emerging tech startups at Tampa Bay Innovation Center. Ken has a background in venture-backed startups and Fortune 50 companies. He brings a wealth of experience to the table. He's a key player in the Tampa Bay tech ecosystem, co-founding the region's first full-time co-working space and leading initiatives to support local startups. Today, we're going to discuss his unique approach to startup acceleration and learn more about Tampa Bay's Innovation Center and the upcoming Climate Tech Accelerator Program. So please join me in welcoming Ken Evans. Ken, thank you so much for joining us today.
Good morning, Fred. It's an honor to be here and happy to chat with you today.
We already covered the beautiful weather this time of year in Tampa before we recorded, but I am jealous as I'm shivering here in New York. But beyond that, can you share with us a little bit about your background, your journey into the world of venture-backed startups, and how it led you to your current role today?
Well, I started out and, going way back to college days, I was like, I say I'm classically trained as a systems analyst. And back then it was, large DEC and IBM mainframes was pretty much all we were working on. But that exposure to both the technical side of what was emerging in computer science, as well as the business side of being a systems analyst and having the charter of going and meeting with users, understanding their day-to-day of what the job was that they were doing to try to digitize it way back then, but really understand business processes, not necessarily just technology-driven adoption of new products and new systems, but the business needs underneath that. Needless to say, right around then, the industry was changing pretty significantly and going in the direction of early adoption of networked computers and the emergence of PCs and a really, really big shift in how people were adopting technology. So my first job was not as a classically trained systems analyst on a mainframe. It was as a systems engineer working with PCs and connecting them on LANs. And so that exposure was great from a perspective of meeting with users who most often did not understand why they had new technology being thrust into their workplace, and explaining to them and actually becoming a de facto trainer on what this was going to mean to their job. But it also exposed me to a ton of early stage startups, which we take for granted now, that built the industry. So Novell and 3Com and networking, IBM and DEC in the networking as well. A number of other companies that got gobbled up with acquisitions over the years. But I started working with a lot of startups at that time and saw their benefits. I saw the struggles of getting them to market and having those technologies adopted. I was, many times I was often the trainer, the de facto trainer, helping people understand why they needed these technologies and how it was going to impact them. So it was, that perfect storm of understanding the technology, but also having to understand the business process and the people and their reluctance to actually adopt technology. I replaced so many antiquated technologies and machines, from Burroughs accounting machines to, all sorts of mag strip bookkeeping systems. I mean, it was the heyday of, that switch over to PCs at that time. And there were just a lot of opportunities to learn very, very quickly where the industry was going. It was moving very, very quickly at that time. And it was moving quickly with non-traditional players. IBM and HP and those folks really were not a player. It was Compaq, Novell, 3Com, and all the companies that really built not just the PC industry, but built the VAR and channel for delivering those technologies to the users.
What was some of those challenges, right? You mentioned non-traditional players, and we see this all the time, where there's an interesting startup or a new technology, and it's viewed as not one of the big hitters in the space. So it feels risky to a large organization. How did you navigate that when you're back in that world and you're saying, hey, wait a second, this you may have never heard this company. They're delivering something that is truly valuable.
Well, as a system engineer, I was somewhat immune to that because I wasn't the salesperson. So I just cleaned up the mess that the salesperson created by selling something that was non-traditional. But to the credit of the salespeople I was working with, they were able to get some of these non-traditional brand names into some of these fairly large organizations. At that time, I was working in Syracuse, New York, and we were dealing with a lot of Fortune 5,000 companies and a lot of big law firms and academia, you name it. But you're right. I mean, the safe bet was, and the old saying was, no one ever got fired for buying IBM. Right. And that was very, very true. Now, replace that with no one got fired for buying Cisco or, the other names that are now dominant in the industry. But that was what a lot of the salespeople that I was working with were up against. Why does this box not say IBM on it? And why are we even considering that? And one of the things that I always used to tell salespeople, because salespeople love to stop by when they were having meetings in people's offices, they would love to stop by, not the conference room, but that person's desk. And I learned the tactic of that was they wanted to see what their interests were because they were trying to build a relationship. So if there was a picture of them playing golf or fishing or something like that, that became the glue that built those relationships. As the SE who was, wandering behind, I looked at the bookshelves. I looked at what was on their credenza. And if all the manuals were those gray IBM manuals, I had to have the difficult conversation with the salesperson afterwards, like, you have a 10% chance of actually getting anything done here because they only buy IBM or they only buy this vendor. And, that was an aha moment for me to understand, behavior, past behavioral patterns of how people look at technology and adopting new solutions to their business.
I love that. So let's maybe transition from there into, you co-founded Tampa Bay's first full-time co-working space. Can you talk about the decision to do that and how that has contributed to the local tech ecosystem?
Well, I mean, that was a several decade jump you just did there on me. So, but when I was first in Tampa Bay and I moved here from Seattle, I realized that there was a very, very different culture about talking about technology, talking about startups, working with entrepreneurs. And at that time, one of the things I was doing was running a workshop called the Enterprise Academy, or the Entrepreneurship Academy, excuse me. And we were dealing with a lot of early stage startups. And once a month, I would hold a workshop and meet with them, understand the progress, help them do, some initial market research and customer discovery. But the people that were participating in that program said, well, that's not enough. Can we meet for coffee every week? And so we started to meet at a local Starbucks and then another local boutique coffee place every single Thursday from 1:30 to 3, and just talk about the challenges and talk about, what they were going through and what they were building and, why they were either being successful or not being successful. And right around then, I started to do some investigation on people meeting to just talk about things and how to run workshops and how to do that. And that's when I tripped across the co-working movement at that time. Yeah. So let's say about 2008, 2009. And this was something that was popping up in some of the other major cities. Seattle had a small movement. Philadelphia had a very popular one. And obviously Manhattan and San Francisco, where people were sharing office space, unused office space, usually with freelancers that they might want to use for projects in the future. But it became kind of a movement at that time. And so we looked at that, and along with a partner who was kind of co-teaching those workshops with me, he needed a new office. So he got an office bigger than he needed in very affordable space. And we hung up a shingle and said, this side of the office is this marketing agency, and this side of the office is going to be Idea Field Co-working, just to try it out. And we adopted some people that came in. Meetup started using the space. It was interesting, but it was also a little bit disconcerting for people. Like, why would I want to go into a space and talk about my idea where someone's going to steal it? And that was part of that cultural shift in Tampa Bay that was so different than what I was used to from Seattle. Where people were aggressively talking about their ideas. They would go into pubs and coffee shops hoping to run into someone and try their idea out and get feedback on that. And we had a 180-degree opposite culture here in Tampa Bay where people didn't want to do that. So Ultimately, Idea Field Co-working closed after about 2.5 years because I got a full-time job and a number of other things happened. But it was a great test case. It was a great guinea pig for where is the tech community in Tampa Bay? Who is it, and what are they doing?
Yeah.
And so one of the things that came out of that cultural shift was we had our first bar camp in 2008, an unconference that no one knew anything about other than a couple of the organizers said, well, they're doing one in Nashville and Orlando. Why don't we do one here? And that became bar camp, which we ran for 12 straight years and became one of the biggest bar camps in the country where people just came and shared ideas.
What else have you noticed, or did you notice then, and have you noticed now that is unique about the Tampa entrepreneurial ecosystem? Is there something that defines it differently than the Seattles and Nashvilles of the world?
I wouldn't say unique or different. I think we're all on a path. All cities are on a path of maturity and evolution. But I've been here 20 years and I've seen it become much more open. And I've seen people come into the community and then comment to me about how welcoming and open this is. And this is not a Chamber of Commerce commercial, but people come here from other tech ecosystems to say it was so easy to find people. It was so easy to get integrated. That being said, what else is happening in town? There's no one calendar that rules them all. And so you're constantly being a traffic cop and directing people, check out this meetup, and this is a good group over here, and these people are working on AI, and these people over here are working on blockchain type stuff. And you just have to get out there and do a lot of things. Where in Seattle, it was much more structured. There was something to do almost every day and every morning for breakfast in Seattle, some type of a networking group, some type of a meetup before meetup actually was a formal thing. But Tampa, quickly embraced a lot of that. But there were a lot of growing pains as well. And, some of those things came naturally. Some of those things had to be a little bit forced, I would say, because when I got here, innovation was kind of seen as something that was the domain of academia or economic development. And economic development primarily is in charge of relocating companies to our area. Right. Companies of 500 people or more. And that is not where innovation lives. And academia is great if you want to, raise research dollars, do interesting research, but it kind of stops once the patent is issued. And again, that's not really where innovation happens. So I take a much more of I'll call it a stone soup approach. You've got to have a lot of people doing a lot of interesting things, contributing to the overall ecosystem, building, trying new things, failing. Yes, we talk about failing, but it's really an iterative learning process. So Tampa has evolved to the point where we are a very, very open and aggressive community. That being said, there's always more work to do. A couple of us hijacked a podcast that was being done by a local politician for economic development. He was actually running for Congress at the time, but that wasn't going to work out. And so he shifted to talk about economic development. And a couple of us showed up at his every Friday podcast at a local coffee shop and basically forced our way into the table and said, stop talking about economic development that way. That's not the way innovation works. And basically hijacked the next 2 years of his podcast to talk about our experience in building startups and the Moneyball approach. You've got to hit a lot of singles. You got to get on base. This is not about that one big win, swinging for the fences and saying, see, we built the next Facebook. Nobody cares about that. It's all those little iterations that happen. It's all those shoulders that you're standing on of all the people that have done interesting things before.
All right, Ken, I'm super excited about what you just said. So I just had a conversation yesterday about on the VC side, they talk about the power law, this idea that, you take 100 shots and only, 1 to 5 of them are going to turn into your unicorn, your Facebook, right? And that's sort of the prevailing VC language of this idea of, you don't know which one's going to hit, place a lot of bets, it's throwing spaghetti at the wall, but if you place enough bets, one's going to make it. And I always found that to be a very dangerous and an interesting approach. And what goes with that is this idea of blitz scaling. All the money goes to get as big as fast as you can, right? Like torpedo, whatever, man the torpedoes. We're going down. We're either going to become Uber or we're going to go out of business.
Yep.
And you just mentioned the Moneyball approach, which I've never heard it phrased that way. I love that, which is the singles, right? The doubles, and you build on them and they start to grow. Can you talk about, based on all your experience, that tension between the sort of Moneyball, if we build it, they will come, versus this idea of like, hey, it is about commercializable wins?
Well, commercializable wins, overnight successes take 7 to 10 years. And, you don't see that. And we didn't see that here in Tampa Bay. We had some really significant wins in Tampa Bay in the late 90s and 2000s. But because of the bust in 2000, people were reticent to invest in that. We're an environment where investors always made money in real estate. So whether it was a chain restaurant or a parking garage, that was always reasonably reliable. All investment comes with risk. I understand that. But, people weren't really leaning into technology because they saw, the few people that made out fine, kind of took their money and ran. And the people that lost money just, continued to lick their wounds and said, I'll never do that again. So, Tampa Bay was the home in St. Pete, right where we're sitting right now in this building, was the home of Wikipedia. But, when Jimmy Wales built Wikipedia, I think he had like 5 or 6 people, a room full of servers, and that was and then all the network of the people that he was able to gather to be part of that organization. Well, from an economic development standpoint, or even an academic standpoint, 5 people in a room full of servers doesn't sound very sexy. It's not much of a press release or a ribbon cutting type moment. And so we overlook things like that. But there were other companies. There was TradeX, which got sold to, it eventually got sold to Yahoo, but there were a couple of other people that acquired it along the way. TradeX was a big win for the late 90s, early 2000. Open Network was another great win that eventually got sold to BMC. Blue Ocean was another great win that got sold to BMC. So you have these wins, but you have to be, patient with how you account for those wins. It's, again, economic development wants to see a big office building with a name on it and 500 people move into the area. Right. That's not the way tech works. And so if you want tech to work, you have to support people that are building products, not signing leases. Yeah. And so, a lot of those Moneyball moments happen without the big investment. You just have to have the right environment. So yes, VCs take 100 shots on goal, hoping to score a couple. You're doing that as an ecosystem, but you're not necessarily investing in every one of those startups. You're just saying, what do you need to continue with what you're doing, with the mentorship, the advisors, the customers, most importantly. Can we connect you to customers? Because if you get revenue, that solves a lot of problems. It also makes you a much better target for investment if you are going to be scalable and investment worthy. But, revenue first, customers first, not I've got a pitch deck and I want to start, I want to go to Sand Hill Road.
I agree with you more. So what's that?
It's not, just have a pretty pitch deck, put lipstick on the pig, and then go do the tour down Sand Hill Road. That's not the way it works, especially when you're not, already living in Palo Alto and known to the ecosystem. You got to go build the product. You've got to go find some customers and revenue. Yeah,
I love revenue first. I've talked about it a little bit on the show before, but the name Venture Fuel came from my first entry into the tech ecosystem, startup ecosystem. A founder told me that they had joined an accelerator. They had given up 6 or 8% of their equity. And I said, for what? And they said, oh, well, they're helping me with my pitch deck. And there's some like junior people at this big company that are advising me. And I'm like, dude, there's a better way to fuel your venture. You need to go get deals. You need to go get some commercial deals, because if all of a sudden you're working with a blue chip company, every other blue chip company is going to want to work with you. Now your investors, there's a reason to believe your valuation just went up.
Yeah.
But I find like a lot of the accelerator ecosystem is very focused on the, like, is your pitch deck good? What does your pitch look like? Let's go get you for the next round of raising money. And I'm like, where's the commercial coaching? Where's the business fundamental coaching? And I think that's what's interesting about what you're doing, within the Innovation Center and the Accelerator, from what I've read. Can you talk to that a little bit?
Oh, Fred, you hit on my favorite topic, because I mean, that's one of the things I talk about when we talk about the program that we built here versus a lot of programs. And this is not a competition. This is not a race. This is like, how do we focus on the entrepreneur, the startup founder, and do right by them? I mean, are we good stewards of the people that are building the products? I'm not the entrepreneur. They're the entrepreneur. I'm just here to basically, be the coach. And a lot of that coaching is, okay, we're going to do wind sprints. No, I want to run a marathon. No, we're going to do wind sprints. We're going to do the basics. We're going to do customer discovery. We're going to do uncomfortable things. I'm going to ask you questions that you don't have answers for, and then we're going to go figure that out. And that is very different from a lot of the programs that I see. I have people come through my program that have paid $40,000, $60,000 for the lipstick on the pig website and pitch deck. And it's like, well, we never talked about this in the other program. Well, you're right. But I mean, my background is tainted by being a product manager most of my life. And so I want to see that there's actually something that needs to be built, not just something that you want to build. So we spend a lot of time on customer discovery. If they were, currently developing something, I usually say, stop and let's figure out if we really should build this or what we should build. But I find a lot of accelerator programs are more cheerleaders than they are anything else. And I hate to say this the wrong way, but the startup founder will come in and say, here's my idea. And they say, okay, let's promote it. And I take a different approach of like, why do you think that? Yeah. What is your validation of why that needs to be built? And then we figure that out. And the first thing that they come in with is, here's my 30-page business plan. Like, I'm not reading that. Like, put your idea on a bumper sticker or a yard sign. And this is week 1 of my workshop. Put your idea on a bumper sticker or a yard sign and sell it to me in 6 words or less. And then there's all sorts of hand waving and angst that goes on around that. But like, if you can't do that, you should not be in this game. Yeah. You got to be able to net this thing out. And that netting it out comes from understanding, what demand are you satisfying? What customer's life are you making better? And so we're gonna take 2 steps back with everyone in the program and figure that out before we take that next step forward.
I love it. I think one of the intersections here that I'm very curious about is, as you think about the new accelerator, and specifically when you think about climate tech, sustainability, resilience, oftentimes those have been industries where someone just goes and raises lots of money without the business savvy or the customer need. And then, anyway, that their whole business is just raising money. That's all they're doing rather than going to a solution. I'm interested how those two worlds intersect for you. This idea about, focusing on the business, the problem that you're solving, along with climate. Can you speak to that as a focus area and what you're seeing and what you're excited about?
Well, I mean, it's tough. And I learned a lot from the first Climate Tech Accelerator we did, because we had a lot of what I'll call, lab bench worthy experiments, but they were so far away from commercialization that, an accelerator might not have been the right place for them. Now, those founders learned a lot about the process, but it's not something they can really leverage because, they're still living in a petri dish someplace. Yeah. And that's the tough thing about climate, because a lot of it is going to take decades of iteration to actually get to the point where you've got a commercializable product. And even then, it may be really difficult to find the right number of customers to be able to make that happen. And it might be, a municipality, it may be a country, it may be a research institution. It's a very, very different marketplace than building products for enterprise and B2B. Okay. That being said, we had some companies in the last accelerator for climate tech that were more B2B related. And their path to market, their go-to-market model looked a lot more like a typical SMB or enterprise play. You can have good impacts in climate sustainability resilience without it being a science experiment, or what I'll call a Franken product, where it's it's going to iterate. We're going to piece this together here and that over there and sew it together and see what it looks like, and you end up with a monster that really can't be deployed. And that's a problem with a lot of those science experiments. But we had a couple of companies in the last Climate Tech Accelerator that looked a lot more like an enterprise product. One of them was a company out of Seattle called Get Green. And I like to call it like a Fitbit for climate. So it helped employees track their behavior and made suggestions about their behavior to make them more climate tech friendly, more sustainability friendly. And so you get an entire employee population doing that. And you actually, as a company, well, maybe it's a feel-good program, or maybe it's something you can actually track and measure, but you're actually doing positive things for your region, or for your state, or for your country. So, having something like that was an app on their phone that could be deployed and managed primarily by the HR organization, because they're kind of the go-to organization, is like, hey, are we a sustainable company? Are we working towards being a net zero company? And, who owns that? Well, maybe there's an ESG officer, maybe it's HR, but they basically came up with something, just like my Fitbit, that can be tied into my insurance company. Let's report back on my behavior, and then give me good feedback, but also give the ecosystem good feedback. Are we doing positive things? Like, hey, I don't know what to do next. Okay, here's a list of things that you can go do. And so they've deployed that product with a couple of big brands, but also in academia for student populations, because that's more ripe for those type of questions. To have a enterprise-looking app that is a sustainability play.
I love it. So you mentioned this is the second Climate Tech Accelerator. I believe it's the 8th accelerator overall for the center. What has changed? How have you evolved the program from the learnings of the first 7?
Well, I mean, I do tighten up the curriculum a little bit along the way. I try out different guest speakers. Sometimes they work out, sometimes they don't. But the general vibe of the program is always going to be the same. And that's what I get great feedback. We never would have thought of those things. So you had this speaker that made me think about this, or this changed my perspective on that marketplace or that customer. So it really goes back to customer discovery, validation, and the goal of finding product market fit, not the goal of raising money, not the goal of retiring, not the goal of even exiting and selling the company to someone else or licensing the technology. What's the product market fit? So, have you done the requisite customer validation? And if not, let's help you figure that out. I always like to say, tell me who your first 6 customers are. Don't tell me about this hockey stick of how you're going to get to $5 million ARR. I don't care, nor do I believe in those numbers. But if you can identify 6 customers, then we can kind of work on, what does that customer look like? What's their buying behavior in the past? Are there enough of those customers to actually scale the idea to a bigger, better thing? And that's a lot of angst on these people. I don't know who they are. I was like, well, then we really need to take 2 steps back, because you shouldn't be building anything. You shouldn't be cashing in your 401k to fund this thing, and you certainly shouldn't be out trying to raise money for something if you can't identify who those first 6 customers are.
I love it. Ken, where should people go to learn more about your work, about the accelerator, the opportunity? How can we help kind of drive some interest in what's next for you?
The accelerator applications are open for the next accelerator program. So you can go to the website for Tampa Bay Innovation Center, which is TB Innovates, TBINNOVATES.com/accelerator. There you will find a link to apply, and that will take you to the GUS platform. They manage our applications. And we have been a little bit delayed because we just moved into a new building. So that pushed back a lot of things that we wanted to do in the December, January timeframe. But we're finally in the new building. So as soon as I get about 200 applications, then I'll start reviewing them with our corporate champions. So the corporate champions that we have range from Duke Energy to Pods Moving and Storage, Mach 49, and a couple of other companies that are local here in the Tampa Bay area that really want to see us invest in the companies that are building those interesting things. So once we get to 200 applications, I'll narrow that down to probably 30, 35 prospects. We'll do interviews and find people that are going to be a good fit for the program. Once we do that, then we'll launch. So it's a little bit flexible right now. but mainly because I just haven't been promoting the program. But that's my number one goal. We just got our showcase for cohort 7 out of the way yesterday. We had a standing room only crowd in the new building, and Kathy Wood was our keynote speaker. It was a great event. But now I've got to do my next job, which is recruit people for the Climate Tech Accelerator. We are trying to do this local here in St. Pete. We have a new building. We have, our own classrooms. So I really want to do this for Florida-based companies this time. It may be a little bit of a hybrid program, but I really want to focus on companies that are here in the Tampa Bay region and the 7 surrounding counties that make up Tampa Bay, because I think there are great ideas out there and people that need help with those ideas. And that's what we do. We don't take any equity. There's no charge for the program, but you are going to have to really buckle down and be humble about your idea and be ready to learn.
I love it. Well, I'm going to connect you with some interesting VCs in the climate space. One of whom is based in Florida nearby you. So you guys should definitely connect. But this is great. I love your point of view on what you're doing. Wishing you luck. We will, of course, promote it. And thank you for everything you're doing to ignite change and help people understand that getting that first check of revenue is as valuable as getting your investment.
Absolutely. Oh, I appreciate it, Fred. Thank you for inviting me to the podcast.
Thank you, sir.